What if? The forgotten empire of Tartaria. What if? Most of the history we know is only a collection of chosen fragments, and the rest was deliberately buried. Not buried in the sands of time, but beneath the deep layers of memory erased from the human mind. On the old maps of the 16th and 17th centuries, there once appeared a name, stretching from the Caspian Sea the way to the Pacific Ocean: Tartaria. A vast empire that once covered half the world, existing for hundreds of years, and then it vanished. No war, no collapse, just erased. Gone from textbooks, gone from maps, gone from the collective memory of humankind. Was it merely a mistake of history, or a secret deliberately concealed? Could Tartaria have once held a power, a knowledge, a technology so profound that the world itself had to be reset? Tonight, let us wander through the mist of forgotten memories, where ancient maps, buried cities, and forbidden stories whisper softly together about the greatest empire that history ever forgot. So now, close your eyes and imagine a world before the world we know. A time when giant cities rose not from steel and glass, but from white marble and sound. Domes that hummed with energy, spires that caught the music of the wind. Across endless plains of Eurasia, there were towers that glowed at night, machines that needed no fire, and rivers that carried light instead of water. They said it was the age of harmony, when architecture itself was alive, resonating with the same frequency as the earth. And at the heart of it all was Tartaria, an empire without borders, without greed, without war. Its knowledge was whispered to be ancient, older than Egypt, older than Sumer, perhaps even older than memory itself. But then, something happened. A silence swept across the lands. Maps were redrawn, histories rewritten, and the name Tartaria faded like dust in the wind. Tonight we will search for its traces, in the forgotten architecture, in the forbidden maps, and in the quiet echoes of a world that may have once been far greater than our own. Part 1. The mysterious disappearance of the Tartarian Empire. What if the greatest empire in history was not Rome, Egypt, or even Atlantis, but Tartaria? That opening question feels like a doorway, a passage between the world of facts and the world of forgotten dreams. It invites us to step away from the familiar comfort of textbooks and into the dim, uncharted corridors of humanity's erased memory. It doesn't merely awaken curiosity, it stirs something deeper, a quiet, uneasy sense that something in our history doesn't quite fit, that something has been omitted. When one speaks of Tartaria, it is not of a country, but of a symbol of loss. On maps from the 16th to 18th centuries, that name once stretched across half of Asia, from the Caspian Sea all the way to the Pacific Ocean. A vast land that united many peoples, many cultures, under one shared title. And then, within a short span of time, Tartaria disappeared. No war, no destruction, no farewell, simply erased. The silence of maps, when memory is stripped of form, history never vanishes in silence unless someone wants it silent. Tartaria stands as one of the rare cases where an entire civilization vanished without a trace, not through defeat, not through decay, but through the quiet rewriting of human memory. Ancient maps, the witnesses of the past, clearly show Tartaria's existence. But maps themselves are born of power. The hand that draws the borders also decides who is remembered and who must be forgotten. Here, the silence surrounding Tartaria is not geographical, it is deliberate emptiness. Like a torn page missing from the diary of humankind, no one knows what was written there, only the jagged edge remains. Proof that something once existed. The power of forgetting. The hand that erased. Some have suggested that a powerful hand deliberately erased Tartaria. It is the central hypothesis. But its truth is not what gives it power. Its power lies in what it represents, the relationship between memory, power, and truth. Every civilization rewrites its own history. Whatever does not serve the current order, its religion, its knowledge, its technology, or its philosophy, is pushed aside. If Tartaria truly existed as an advanced civilization, one that harnessed natural energy or possessed wisdom beyond our modern reach, then its erasure would not merely be political, but psychological, a defense mechanism of humanity itself. Carl Jung once said, "Whatever we repress in the collective psyche will one day return, disguised as myth. What is buried in the collective unconscious always returns, not as fact, but as legend." And perhaps Tartaria is the echo of that repressed memory, a whisper from the part of history humanity cannot face. Symbolism. Tartaria as the mirror of the mind. On a symbolic level, Tartaria is not merely a forgotten empire. It is a reflection of the human psyche itself. Just as we bury certain memories deep within our own subconscious, so too has humanity buried entire chapters of its own past. Those forgotten chapters, what Jung called the shadow of civilization, are where forbidden knowledge, suppressed beliefs, and unspoken truths reside. Tartaria becomes the image of that collective shadow. When we tell its story, we are not merely exploring history. We are exploring the architecture of our own mind. Perhaps the disappearance of Tartaria is an allegory for the forgetting of the human soul itself, a moment when humanity chose knowledge over wisdom and power over harmony with nature. Tone and rhythm. From epic to stillness. The story of Tartaria should not be told in excitement, but in a slow, enchanting silence. It does not need to shout. It only needs to let silence speak for the past. An Aichian empire once stretched across half the world, then vanished without a word. No smoke, no ruin, only silence. This rhythm draws the listener inward into a meditative state where the voids of history mirror the quiet spaces of the soul. That is the essence of history for sleep, not to prove, but to awaken, not through facts, but through feeling. History as a collective dream Tartaria may have existed, or it may be the dream of a collective mind searching for a lost golden age. But in that search itself, humanity retells its oldest story, the fear of forgetting and the longing to remember. Perhaps Tartaria captivates us, not because it was the greatest empire, but because it reflects our doubt, our quiet suspicion, that history itself may be incomplete. Each listener wonders, if this was erased, what else has been hidden, from symbol to reality? When the past rises from the ground, and then as memory stirs, the story begins to shift. From the disappearance in books to the burial beneath the earth, the listener starts to feel that if memories can be erased from the mind, their traces, physical or spiritual, must still linger somewhere around us. In old buildings, in streets that lie below today's pavement, in bricks that rise from the soil like whispers of the forgotten. The mud flood hypothesis. If Tartaria was erased from history, perhaps it did not vanish. It was buried. Beneath the soil, beneath the streets of modern cities, the half-buried towers still whisper their stories. Perhaps we are walking upon the ruins of a world far greater than we were ever taught to believe. Part 2. The Mud Flood Hypothesis. If Tartaria was not erased but buried, then perhaps what lies beneath our feet today is not just soil, but memory. There are cities where, when people dig into the earth, they do not find fossils. They find windows. Windows, door frames, even entire floors, buried deep beneath the ground, as if the whole world had once been swallowed, not by water, but by mud. Seattle, Moscow, Paris, Edinburgh, Chicago. From Europe to Asia, from America to Africa. All around the world there exist buildings, half buried beneath the present surface of the earth. Not a few houses, but entire neighborhoods, still intact. Only now. Their front doors have become basements, and their ground floor windows stare silently into walls of earth. When the world was buried without warning, the mud flood hypothesis suggests that, at some point in the not-so-distant past, a massive cataclysm of mud swept across the earth. Unlike the biblical flood of water, this deluge came quietly, but mercilessly. A wave of mud, 10 to 20 feet deep, flowed through cities, swallowing their foundations and entombing the remnants of an earlier world. When the soil hardened, new generations built atop it, walking streets that were now higher, raising new walls, new homes, unaware that beneath their feet, an older civilization still slept. From layers of earth, the rise of collective memory. When modern archaeologists encountered this phenomenon in cities across the world, they explained it as natural, erosion, sediment, geological change. But not everyone accepted that explanation. The phenomenon was too widespread, too uniform, too precise. From half-buried European palaces to Russian cathedrals whose doors now lie below street level, all echoed the same strange harmony. It was as if Earth herself, in a single deep breath, had covered her past in mud. And when humanity awoke, we simply knew that something had changed. A new age began, but no one could remember what had ended before it. A theory, or a memory. Some believe that the mud flood was not a natural disaster at all, but a deliberate act. A plan to bury an entire civilization. Tartaria. If Tartaria was once a great empire, possessing knowledge of resonance, sound, and natural energy far beyond our own, then its erasure could not be achieved by ink and cartography alone. It had to be completed through the very body of the earth. In ancient symbolism, mud represents primordial chaos, the element from which humanity itself was shaped in the myths of Mesopotamia and the Bible alike. If water is the symbol of cleansing, then mud is the symbol of rebirth. Perhaps the mud flood was not destruction, but ritual renewal, the planet's way of burying one world to give birth to another. The voice of the earth. A memory that cannot be buried. Imagine, you are walking down a quiet street in Paris. Beneath your feet, only a few meters below, there may be windows from an age long forgotten. Once, they opened toward the light. Now, they are sealed by earth. But in the stillness of night, you might hear it. A faint whisper rising from below. The echo of Tartaria. In Jungian psychology, this mirrors the resurfacing of memories buried deep within the collective unconscious. The sunken buildings and buried foundations are physical metaphors for what lies hidden in the mind of humanity. Every civilization, every human being, carries within them layers of mud, unseen memories waiting to be recognized. And one day, when the surface cracks open, those memories will rise again. When mud becomes the symbol of rebirth. Viewed through the eyes of a storyteller, the mud flood is not merely a catastrophe. It is a cycle. Mud, like darkness, is not an end. It is the condition for light to return. Perhaps Tartaria never died. Perhaps it only sleeps, cradled within the warm soil like a child resting in the womb of the earth. One day, when humanity is ready, the layers will be lifted, and the memory of Tartaria and its wisdom will rise again. Not as a material empire, but as a spiritual symbol, a call to return home. The voice and the breath of silence. This part of the story should be told in a low and steady voice, like an echo within a cave. Each line should breathe, so the listener can see the image within their mind. Windows buried in earth, half-sunken streets, and a world that perhaps was never fully ours. The narration should flow like mist, never declaring, never insisting, only suggesting, allowing the listener's imagination to weave what remains unsaid. That is the art of history for sleep, turning history into a lullaby of remembrance, not a lecture of reason. Final reflection. Tartaria, the memory beneath the earth. The mud flood is not merely a story of disaster, but a metaphor for humanity's forgetfulness. We have built new cities atop the ruins of our own memory, both literally and symbolically. But what is buried never truly disappears. It waits for time, for a whisper, for a footstep, to be remembered again. And when the layers of mud began to open, people found something stranger than buried buildings. They found giant skeletons, taller than any human, as if they belonged to another race, the ancient inhabitants, buried alongside the lost world of Tartaria. Part 3. The Giants, Inhabitants of Tartaria. And when the layers of mud began to open, they did not find only stone or wood or ancient walls. They found bones, giant bones, far beyond the size of any modern human. Forgotten traces of giants. Since the late 19th century, Western newspapers have reported strange discoveries, skeletons more than 3 meters long unearthed on farms in the American Midwest, skulls as large as Roman helmets, and teeth twice the size of any ordinary man's. In other parts of the world, the Caucasus, the Altai Mountains, Siberia, similar remains have been found. Burial pits, grave foundations, and tools of extraordinary proportions. All of them seem to speak the same silent language. There was once another race that lived on this earth. Those newspaper stories vanished soon after, retracted, dismissed, or quietly labeled as folklore. But copies survived, yellowed clippings hidden in archives and in the minds of those who once read them. They never forgot. Nephilim, Titans, and Bogatyrs, names that echo in myth. No culture is without its giants. The Bible speaks of the Nephilim, the sons of the gods who came to the daughters of men. Greek mythology remembers the Titans, primordial beings cast out of the heavens by Zeus. Norse legends tell of the Hotnar, the giants of ice and storm, and in Russia they were known as Bogatyrs, ancient warriors of superhuman strength. Different languages, different lands, yet the same story of enormous beings who lived before humankind as we know it, and then vanished, leaving the world to smaller creatures. Were they merely symbols of faith, or genetic memories, echoes written deep into our DNA, fragments of a history science has yet to decode? The Tartarian hypothesis, giants as the first citizens of the buried empire. Believers in the Tartarian theory claim that these giants were not myths at all, but the original inhabitants, perhaps even the founders of the Empire of Tartaria. They were not supernatural beings, but hybrids, offspring of humanity, and the ancient celestial entities once called the Anunnaki, the gods from above. If Tartaria was the last great civilization of that divine age, then the Tartarian giants were its surviving witnesses, beings who lived between the worlds of man and God. The grand arches, enormous doors, and towering domes of ancient architecture may once have been built for them. Beings tall and powerful, living in harmony with the resonant energy of the earth itself. When Tartaria fell, these giants vanished too, as if swallowed by the mud of the Great Flood, leaving behind only a few bones, a few monuments, and stories whispered beside dying embers. The silence of science and the voice of memory. Mainstream archaeology denies it all, calling it error, exaggeration, the imagination of 19th century reporters. Yet seekers of truth, independent researchers, wanderers through forgotten libraries, still gather every fragment of evidence they can find. Some say the remains were confiscated, hidden in museums, locked away from public eyes. Others believe they were destroyed because their existence would shatter the foundations of modern history. Whatever the truth, that sense of something being concealed has planted a haunting feeling in our minds, a mix of wonder, fear, and nostalgia, as if a part of us remembers something, a memory we cannot name, from a time when humanity was not as small as it is now. Genetic memory. When the blood remembers what the mind forgets, modern science admits that human DNA contains traces of Neanderthal and Denisovan genes, ancient species of immense strength and endurance. The Tartarian theory dares to ask, what if those fragments are the remnants of the giants? What if within each of us still lies a spark from the age of Tartaria, a time when humanity and divinity were not yet separate? If we listen closely, we may feel it. A primal instinct stirring deep in our bones, a whisper within the marrow. We were once greater, stronger, more in tune with the earth. That is not imagination, it is the biological memory of the soul, the giants, as symbols of spiritual height. On a symbolic level, the giants are not merely physical beings. They represent humanity in its complete form, a time before the mind was divided. They are the image of humankind before forgetting, great not in body, but in consciousness. When Tartaria was buried, perhaps that was the moment human awareness shrank, withdrawing from its cosmic stature to become the fragile beings we know today. And so, deep within us, the giants still live, in our dreams, in our longing, in those moments when we gaze at the stars and feel that we once belonged there. They once walked among mountains as though across open plains touched the sky with their hands and spoke to the earth in the language of thunder. Then they vanished, and we, the small ones, wander among their ashes, searching for their footprints in the dust of history. Final reflection. When myth returns. Perhaps the giants never existed in flesh and bone, but in the symbolic depths, they are the primordial memory of lost greatness, a remembrance that humanity, amidst its glass towers and electric skies, is still trying to recall. And perhaps in retelling their story, we are awakening the sleeping giant within ourselves. If the giants of Tartaria truly existed, they were not powerful only in body. They knew how to speak with the world, through sound, through frequency, through invisible energy, and perhaps those secrets still resonate in the domes, in the long echoes of the ancient cathedrals. Part 4. Resonant Sound Technology and Free Energy. When the giants vanished, they carried away no weapons, no gold, no thrones, but the kind of knowledge that could make the whole world tremble, knowledge of free energy, of singing sound, and of the power hidden within silence. On the frozen steppes of Tartaria, it was said that every structure had a soul. Domes, spires, and churches were built not only to be seen, but to be heard, to hear the earth sing, to hear space resonate with its own voice. For them, sound was not merely a phenomenon, it was a source of power. Every song, every vibration, every heartbeat of the cosmos carried a frequency, and that frequency could be resonated, amplified, then transmuted into pure energy. No coal, no fire, no wires, only the understanding of the language of sound, and the wisdom to let architecture become the instrument of God. Buildings that sing. When you step into an old church in Moscow or Prague, if you lift your voice, the walls seem to answer. That is no accident. The builders measured every angle, every curve, every stone to create perfect acoustic resonance. Like plucking a single string, the sound travels through air, reflects through the walls, and returns stronger, fuller, as if the whole building is breathing with you. It is believed that Tartarian structures, with circular domes, pointed towers, and symmetrical motifs, were not merely dwellings or places of worship, but enormous resonant energy devices. They gathered the oscillations of sound, concentrated the energy of the atmosphere, then carried it through copper tubes and metal spires, like the blood vessels of a colossal living being. That is why copper domes appear everywhere, not only in Europe, but across Asia, India, the Middle East, all speaking, it seems, the same sacred language of geometry. Sound, the breath of the universe. Sound is the rhythm of existence, from the heartbeat in the womb to the harmonies of planets in orbit. Everything vibrates at its own frequency. The Tartarians may have understood this better than anyone. They believed that if humans could tune their frequencies to the Earth's, not only energy, but life itself, would be renewed. They knew how to use 432 Hz, a special resonance aligned with the planet's natural oscillation. That tone could heal the body, calm the mind, and connect the soul to cosmic energy. Today we call it frequency healing, but to Tartaria it was simply life. When they sang, they did not merely pray, they communed. When they built, they did not decorate, they resonated. Every structure, every stone, every dome was a note in the Earth's vast symphony. Free energy, when the sky becomes a power source. If sound was the language, then electricity was the pulse of the world they made. Old images show metal towers, glowing domes, and even airships drifting silently through the sky. Not by fuel, not by engine, but by invisible energy. Nikola Tesla once said, "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." Perhaps he was merely reminding us of what Tartaria had known for thousands of years. Those resonant energy towers, seen in old drawings, were said to harvest energy from the ionosphere, transforming it into clean electricity, unlimited, wireless. And that, some say, is precisely why that civilization had to be erased. A world powered by free energy is a world that cannot be controlled. When power no longer belongs to those who own oil, gas, or war, then true freedom begins. And perhaps to prevent that, a curtain was drawn, covering all the knowledge of Tartaria in mud, in silence, in forgetting. Resonance, the union of humanity and the earth. In symbolic psychology, resonance is not only physical, it is a spiritual state when two different frequencies merge into one, like two souls breathing in the same rhythm. The Tartarians seemed to live in that state. They did not dominate the earth. They lived with it. They did not extract energy. They conversed with it. Their technology did not destroy nature because it was nature. A form of understanding in harmony, not in opposition. They knew that in every stone, every echo, every breath of wind, there is the vibration of cosmic energy. Listen deeply enough, and human beings can unlock that secret and return to their primordial strength. When silence also sings. In the middle of the night, when all is still, if you place your hand on the wall of an ancient church, you may feel a faint pulse, not of stone, but of time. Those vibrations never vanished. They only slowed, slept, waiting for a quiet soul to hear. Perhaps the free energy Tartaria once held never disappeared. It hides in silence, in moss-covered domes, in copper spires gone dark, and, within our very bodies, beings made of the same universal frequency. Final breath, the memory of stolen knowledge. When modern eyes look at a map of Tartaria, we see cold lands, dry and empty. But with intuition, we glimpse a vast energy grid that once wrapped the planet. Each dome a resonant node, each spire an antenna, and between them, the flow of free energy that sustained a world without war, without fuel, without fear. And then, one day, everything fell silent, as if someone switched off the music. Yet here is the wonder. Sound never truly disappears. It dissolves into space, waiting for another voice to awaken it. Perhaps every time we hear music, every time a bell rings, Tartaria whispers back, not in words but in frequency, the oldest language of the soul. Sound is not only what we hear, it is what we are. If sound was the heart of Tartaria, then the sky was its wings. For old drawings and blurred photographs from the 19th century show vast airships floating in the heavens. Tartarian airships powered by resonant energy, drifting quietly like wandering stars. And that is where the story continues. In Part 5, Airships and Ancient Flight Technology. Part 5, Airships and Ancient Flight Technology. There was once a time when the sky did not belong only to birds and gods, when humankind, or perhaps those who came before us, soared silently in vessels bright as stars drifting through the air like the breath of the universe. In blurred photographs from the 19th century, we see strange shapes hovering behind rooftops, above stone squares, or resting upon bell towers. They were neither balloons nor airplanes. Their bodies were long, metallic, sometimes faintly luminous. People called them Tartarian airships, ancient crafts of a forgotten world. Old drawings, technical sketches, and descriptions in 18th and 19th century journals record astonishing details. A type of flying device powered by resonant energy, needing no combustion engine, no propeller, relying only on electromagnetic waves and the atmospheric field. Principles Nikola Tesla would later describe as the wireless transmission of power. Silent ships of the old sky. There is something strange. Official history tells us that humans first flew in 1903, the year the Wright brothers lifted off at Kitty Hawk. Yet engravings, photographs, and models from decades earlier depict airborne vessels far more complex. In San Francisco in 1896, hundreds of people reported seeing a steamship-shaped craft floating slowly across the night sky, glowing faintly, emitting a low humming sound. Some claimed that beneath it, streams of blue electricity arced toward the ground, as if it were drawing or transmitting energy. Reports appeared in the San Francisco Call, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Herald, then vanished, never mentioned again. Some say they were early experiments in flight, but others, those who remember Tartaria, whispered, "No, that was not invention, that was remembrance." They believe those airships were remnants of an ancient technology, powered by the same resonant principles Tartaria once used to draw energy from the air itself. Resonance and atmospheric energy. Tesla believed that the atmosphere itself was a sea of free energy. He wrote it. The Earth is a conductor of sound, of vibration, of electricity. We live in an ocean of energy, and we only need to learn how to tap it. If the Tartarian hypothesis is true, they had already done just that. They understood that energy is not something to be burned. It is something to be felt. Their airships may have flown by tuning their frequency to the Earth's electric field, creating an invisible lift. What modern physics might call anti-gravity resonance. No noise, no smoke, no fuel, only the pure vibration between metal, air, and the planet's pulse. That is why, in old sketches, Tartarian airships are often shown with copper towers or power pylons nearby, as if they were charged wirelessly through resonance. Perhaps each Tartarian city was an energy station, and their skies a vast electromagnetic network, where people could travel across continents through the harmony of mind and matter. Tesla, the man who remembered the stars. Many believe that Tesla did not invent alternating current. He rediscovered the ancient science of Tartaria. Like an old soul returned, he carried memories no mind could explain, visions and diagrams flashing through him like lightning. In an 1890 design interview, Tesla said, "My brain is only a receiver." In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. Some say that this core was the very same energy field Tartaria once harnessed, a unified field where every vibration connects to every other. Perhaps Tesla was not merely a scientist, but the subconscious heir of a buried civilization, a fragment of Tartarian memory lingering in human blood. And through him, that knowledge shone once more, before it was extinguished again. The Tunguska event, the sky's whisper. On June 30th, 1908, a massive explosion shook Tunguska, Siberia. A fireball illuminated the heavens. Shockwaves flattened 80 million trees in moments. No crater, no debris, no trace. Only an empty silence. Perfect, terrifying. Scientists called it an atmospheric meteor burst, but some whispered it was no meteor. It was a Tartarian airship. They said that after centuries of slumber, an ancient craft buried beneath the ice had reactivated and exploded when its resonant energy went out of balance. Witnesses reported a glowing sphere moving silently across the sky, shimmering blue, then bursting like a second sunrise. Was that the final moment of a technology not meant for this age? A farewell, or a warning from Tartaria to the modern world? We once knew how to fly, but you have forgotten. When the sky becomes memory, the Tartarian airships are not merely symbols of technology, but metaphors for the soul's desire to ascend. Humankind has always looked upward, seeking to rise beyond gravity in body and in spirit. Perhaps Tartaria achieved that. They did not only fly through the air, but through frequency, through consciousness. Their ships were not only metal, but the union of technology and spirit. Their pilots did not steer with hands, but with the harmony of thought and energy. And when that civilization fell, we lost more than machines. We lost the belief that humanity could ever be as free as the sky. Reflection. When the dream of flight is God's memory. Look deeply into mythology, and you'll find the same story everywhere. The chariots of Apollo, the Vimanas of India, the golden discs of the Maya, all tell the same truth. Flight is the natural state of the soul. Tartaria may have known this, and made it into science, but when that knowledge was buried, humanity returned to its feet, crawling upon the earth, gazing upward, forgetting that we were once a species that could fly. Final breath. When the sky calls your name. Tonight, when you look up at the sky, the stars may be only ancient light, but perhaps among the clouds there still drift silent ships, the last of the Tartarian airships sailing through another frequency, unseen, reminding us that the sky was never truly forgotten. For within every soul there remains a part that longs to rise, and perhaps when we dream, we are flying with Tartaria. If the sky was where Tartaria left its wisdom, then beneath the earth they left another trace. Star-shaped fortresses, perfectly symmetrical, as if drawn by the universe itself. And some say they were not fortresses at all, but a global energy network, the still-beating heart of a world long buried. That is where the story continues, in Part 6. The Star Forts, the Global Energy Grid. Part 6. Star Forts, the Global Energy Grid. When seen from above, we do not see war. We see stars carved into the earth, etching so perfect, so solemn, and so mysterious that they feel like the memories of a civilization that has forgotten itself. Across the earth, from old Europe to tropical India, from the shores of Japan to the deserts of Africa, and even the new world of the Americas, vast star shapes still endure, so clear that they can hardly be called coincidence. People call them star forts. But on closer look, these structures seem to speak the language of the cosmos, not of war. There are hundreds, even thousands of such forts scattered across the planet. They share the same traits: perfect symmetry, built according to the golden ratio, and aligned to constellations or the cycles of the sun. No matter where they are, Italy, Poland, India, Japan, or the United States, they all obey the same sacred geometry, a geometry that seems to belong not to a single era, but to a unified planetary intelligence. Stars carved upon the earth, from Bretagne in the Netherlands to Pamanova in Italy, a flawless, nine-pointed star. To works in Poland, Russia, and as far as Goa in India, they all share a circular center ringed by sharp rays that fan outward. From the ground you see moats, ramparts, old gates. From the sky, you see a giant star engraved into the earth. With no airplanes, no satellites, no satellite maps, the people of the 16th and 17th centuries still produced shapes precise to the very angle. Straight lines and curves so exact they seem measured by modern tools. And the strangest thing is this: they all appear at the same time, the same century, the same architectural style, as if someone or something handed them the same blueprint. War or resonance? Historians say the star forts were built for military purposes, their angles meant to deflect cannon fire. But if the aim was only to fight, why build to such absolute geometric perfection and astronomical symmetry? Why would nations so different from one another all choose the same star symbol and apply the golden ratio so rigorously? No one spends decades of labor to make war beautiful. These star forts seem designed not for destruction, but for resonance. Some researchers propose that the outward-pointing rays were not defensive walls, but acoustic and electromagnetic collectors. When wind moves, when sound is made, they generate waves of resonance that travel through water moats and stone bastions, converging at the center. A place that may once have been an energy generator or natural amplifier. If we imagine each fort as an energy lens, then the network of star forts forms a planetary connective system, drawing power from the Earth. resonating with the air and spreading across the world like a cosmic bloodstream. The golden ratio and the language of the stars. The geometry of star forts is a hymn to the golden ratio, 1.618, the proportion found in flowers, seashells, DNA, and galaxies. If nature uses that ratio to sustain balance and harmony, then perhaps Tartaria sought to copy the very structure of life into its architecture. Each star fort is a geometric score, a note in the Earth's symphony of energy. As the sun moves across the sky, light strikes at different angles, reflecting, refracting, and activating inner energy fields. Some forts are oriented precisely to solstices, as if they did not merely observe the sun, but conversed with it. In Japan, ancient star-shaped sites like Goryo-kaku follow similar principles. In India, temples and old fortifications in Jaipur and Gujarat also display symmetrical layouts, stellar alignments, and even correlations with the position of Orion. In North America, forts such as Fort McHenry and Fort Ticonderoga sit exactly on latitudes linked to ancient energy points. Coincidence, or evidence of a global network built by the same knowledge, the same mind, the knowledge of Tartaria, the global energy grid, memory within the Earth. If we plot the coordinates of these star forts on a map, an astonishing pattern emerges. They lie along ley lines, the energy meridians many civilizations believed connect the sacred centers of the Earth. From Stonehenge to Egypt, from Angkor Wat to Machu Picchu, they all sit upon these lines. And now the star forts join that same network. Perhaps Tartaria understood that the Earth has meridians, just as the human body does, and built the star forts as acupuncture points to regulate planetary energy flow, balancing climate, vegetation, and even life itself. If so, then when the empire fell, we lost not just architecture. We lost a vital energy system of the planet. Perhaps that is why the climate began to shift dramatically from the 18th century onward. And perhaps when these resonant centers went silent, the world entered an age of energetic chaos. A cycle we are still living in today. From splendor to silence. After Tartaria vanished, the star forts were occupied, redefined as military fortifications or medieval relics. They were modified, dismantled, forgotten. Some are draped in moss, some became parks. Children play upon the very foundations of an ancient power station. There is a sorrow in that image. Stars that once shone now reduced to decoration. Yet there is tenderness too. For memory, though buried, does not die. It only lies still, waiting for a quiet heart to see it. The breath of geometry and the return of memory. When we behold a star fort, we see not only technique, but consciousness. A recognition that the world has order, rhythm, and that humans once knew how to live in harmony with it. Star forts are the energy maps of the Earth's soul, Tartaria's way of speaking to the cosmos. We understand you. We are part of you. Today, as technology pulls us away from nature, the star forts quietly remind us that science and spirit were once one, and that resonance is the essence of life. Perhaps we do not need to conquer the Earth, only to relearn how to listen to its heartbeat. If the star forts are the Earth's arteries, then the radiant white cities of the late 19th century were Tartaria's final heartbeat. Symphonies of light and stone, flaring once more before the world slid into forgetting. Come with me to Part 7, The White Cities and the World's Fairs, where Tartaria's memory blazed one last time before being erased from history. Part 7, The White Cities and the World's Fairs. When the stars carved into the earth faded, light rose again within the white cities. So beautiful, so surreal, as if an ancient hand had touched marble one last time. At the end of the 19th century, the world awoke from its slumber into a fever dream of architecture. The white cities, magnificent, pure, and almost otherworldly, rose across the globe. Chicago 1893, St. Louis 1904, Paris 1900, San Francisco 1915. White marble-like buildings, domes that touch the heavens, avenues perfect in every curve, electric lights shimmering upon tranquil lakes. It all appeared like the dream of a civilization that could not belong to the industrial age. And then, within just a few short years, everything burned, was demolished, and disappeared, leaving behind only faded photographs, technical sketches, and a silent question. Why would humankind build such grandeur, only to destroy it? The White City. When the world touched the dream of Tartaria, Chicago, 1893. Amidst the grime and smoke of industrial America, a city of pure white suddenly appeared, glowing under electric light. They called it the White City. Over 200 grand buildings rose in less than 2 years, colossal structures, Corinthian columns, domed roofs, statues of gods, canals, and hanging gardens, all so breathtaking that visitors believed they had stepped into a resurrected ancient Rome. But something felt different. These structures did not purely follow Greco-Roman style. They blended Eastern, Byzantine, and Tartarian elements, rounded domes, pointed spires, perfect symmetry, resembling the star forts and resonant temples that once spanned the world. When night fell, electric light illuminated the entire city. For the first time in human history, a whole city shone entirely by electricity. Visitors whispered that Tesla himself was behind this miracle, as he had just unveiled alternating current, AC, a discovery said to free humanity from its dependence on fuel. And some wondered, perhaps this was not a new invention, but an ancient technology, reborn one last time. Cities that rose and vanished. The wonder was not only that these cities were beautiful, but that they appeared and vanished with impossible speed. Chicago, 1893, St. Louis, 1904, Paris, 1900, San Francisco, 1915. A series of expositions, each featuring the same marble-white architecture, the same symmetrical layouts, all constructed within a few years, and then completely destroyed. Authorities claimed the buildings were temporary, made of plaster and wood to cut costs. Yet the old photographs tell a different story. Thick walls, heavy stone columns, details too intricate to be mere facades. In some places, buildings were dug out from beneath the earth, as if they had been there long before. Could it be that these World's Fairs were not construction, but excavation? The Tartarian hypothesis. When the fairs became a curtain, the Tartarian hypothesis suggests that the White Cities were not achievements of the 19th century, but remnants of a lost Tartarian civilization buried beneath the Great Mud Flood. When the deluge covered continents, only rooftops and towers remained above the sludge. As the world restarted, people unearthed these structures. But instead of acknowledging them as relics of an ancient civilization, those in power rewrote history. According to this theory, the World's Fairs were a global campaign to display and then erase the last traces of Tartaria. By claiming these magnificent buildings were temporary fair architecture, they could showcase their glory, then destroy them without suspicion. And still, one question echoes through time. Why were the most radiant works of human history burned to ash within only a few years? Tesla, the final light of Tartaria. At the same time as the White Cities, Nikola Tesla appeared, a wandering star seemingly out of another age. He spoke of free energy, of resonance, of wireless power transmission, of a world without stations, without wires. When Tesla demonstrated his coil, light bulbs glowed across the room with no physical connection, and people watched, spellbound, as if witnessing magic. But placed beside the White City, a haunting pattern emerges. Both ran on invisible light, both promised liberation, and both were suddenly silenced. After the fair, the White City burned. By accident, Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower was dismantled, for financial reasons. Two symbols of illumination and knowledge vanished together, leaving behind a world plunged into the shadow of industrial power. The light that was taken away. They say that when Tesla stood watching his tower fall, he smiled sadly and said, "You may tear down my towers, but you cannot erase the light." Perhaps the light he spoke of was not electricity, but memory. the memory of a world that once lived with energy, not against it. Like the white cities, that light had been lit one last time, to remind humanity that beauty, harmony, and higher wisdom did not belong to the future, but to a past that had been erased. When memory burned one last time. As the white cities glowed in the night, no one realized they were witnessing the final breath of Tartaria. The pillars, domes, and statues all sang a symphony of memory, then vanished into flame, allowing official history to begin again, from zero. Like the last candle of a radiant world, the World's Fairs were Tartaria's farewell song. Afterward, the earth grew quiet, and humanity stepped into an age of industry, smoke, and steel. Perhaps every white stone was never truly stone, but memory, trying to speak before history took its voice away. When the last light of Tartaria faded, the world began to tremble with catastrophe. Great fires, earthquakes, mysterious explosions, as if an invisible hand was resetting the planet. Were these mere natural accidents, or the next step in a plan to erase every trace of Tartarian memory? The answer awaits in Part 8, The Great Catastrophes, the Tools of Historical Erasure. Part 8, The Great Catastrophes, Tools of Historical Erasure. Not every fire burns by accident. Some flames are lit to incinerate memory, and when the ashes fall, history begins again, as if nothing had ever existed before. When the resplendent light of the White City had barely gone out, the world stepped immediately into an age of fire, mud, and tremor. From Chicago to Boston, from San Francisco to Siberia, the earth split. Cities went up in flames, and the splendid architectures, bearing Tartarian signatures, were wiped from the map, almost in unison. Was this mere coincidence, or were these reset events deliberate acts of whitewashing to erase the last memories of Tartaria from the face of the earth? The Chicago Fire of 1871, when a city turned to ash. In October 1871, Chicago, the first white city, caught fire. The blaze raged for nearly 3 days, consumed more than 17,000 buildings, and left over 100,000 people homeless. Records say the fire began in a cow barn, yet the flames moved against the wind, and temperatures soared so high that steel melted and brick buildings collapsed, something ordinary fire alone should not accomplish. Astonishingly, after the conflagration, Chicago was rebuilt within just a few years, in a completely new, modern, square-angled style that erased all classical traces, domes, symmetrical colonnades, everything that once carried the Tartarian resonance. Some independent researchers contend this was not reconstruction, but a planned replacement, a boot sequence for a new civilization, the industrial age where iron, smoke, and coal-fired electricity replaced resonant energy and crystalline light. Boston, San Francisco, and the fires that followed. Only a few years later, Boston burned, then Baltimore, Toronto, Seattle, Spokane, New York, and finally San Francisco in 1906. In San Francisco, a 7.9 earthquake shook the city, but it was the multi-day fires that made it catastrophic, consuming over 80% of the city, including marble buildings, domes, and bronze statues built only decades earlier. When the flames died, the city was replanned from the ground up, flat, modern, and stripped of resonant, ancient architecture. Some say this was nature. But can nature select with such precision, burning the oldest structures and leaving a skeletal frame for the future? Can coincidence repeat the same pattern across many cities, many continents, within only a few decades? Or was this a deliberate sequence, designed to reset the world, to erase the remnants of a civilization not meant to be remembered? When mud rose and the sky exploded in Siberia in 1908, a blast shook the earth. The Tunguska explosion flattened over 80 million trees, made the sky glow for nights on end, yet left no crater, no fragments, no sign of impact, as if the energy source originated within the atmosphere. Some theories claim it was a failed Tesla experiment. Others say it was an ancient Tartarian device inadvertently activated, triggering a colossal resonant detonation. But in the language of symbolism, Tunguska could be the final crack upon Tartaria's screen, the shock that wiped the last memories still buried in the earth. From that point on, the world's map changed. Seas receded, rivers shifted course, climates mutated, as if the planet had been reset and a new human cycle had begun. Reset events, when history is written. In ash. The Tartarian hypothesis views these events not as accidents, but as historical reset events. By creating or exploiting natural disasters, a powerful group cleaned the world, erasing structures, documents, relics, maps, and establishing a standardized civilization with new time, new language, and new technology. With every reset, a portion of history was cut away. What remained was labeled myth, conspiracy, or pseudoscience. And humanity, unaware, continued living inside the new version of reality, with a bleached memory that still echoed in the subconscious. When history is rewritten, memory does not die. It becomes a dream. Fire, mud, and memory. Looking back at the 19th and early 20th centuries, we see a chain of coincidences, too patterned to be chance. The mud flood, cities rising like miracles, the white cities, then fires, earthquakes, and finally silence. It was the final breathing of a civilization, a sequence of inhalations interrupted by accidents, then buried beneath layers of ash, soil, and the wording erected by official history to cover it all. When we stand amid those remnants, a half-buried stone wall, a row of windows sunk below street level, an ancient square now turned into a park, we feel that nothing is quite where it should be. As if the world had been reset mid-story, and the opening chapter erased forever. The objective, to create a new civilization. If the Tartarian hypothesis is true, then these catastrophes were not only destruction, but rites of Genesis. For only by cleansing the past, can one erect a controlled present. A new civilization with limited technology, edited memory, and people who believe they stand at the beginning of history. After the reset events, globalization, education systems, modern science, and modern creeds spread, as if a new program had been installed into humanity. And somewhere deep within our DNA, we still carry the memory of the old program, the memory of Tartaria, of light, of living in harmony with cosmic energy. When history is only ash, perhaps the fires did not only burn cities, they incinerated the bridge between present and past. We live among the ruins of what has been forgotten, walking streets where the past once breathed, never knowing we tread upon memory. Fire does not only burn houses, fire burns truth, and truth survives only in dreams. And when the smoke cleared upon Tartaria's ash, another question was sown like a seed. If Tartaria was erased, where did they come from? Were they the descendants of legendary continents, Atlantis, Mu, Lemuria, empires that vanished beneath the sea, yet left their echo in stone and in blood? The story opens in Part 9, Tartaria, heirs to the legendary continents. Part 9, Tartaria, heirs to the legendary continents. Every vanished civilization leaves an echo, in stone, in wind, and in the recurring dreams of humankind. Perhaps Tartaria was not the beginning, but the final verse of a chain of memories, drifting across the oceans from Atlantis, Mu, and Lemuria. Empires drowned beneath the waters, yet still alive within the bloodstream of history. When the ashes of the great catastrophes had not yet cooled, a question rose, echoing through the night. If Tartaria was erased from history, where did it come from? It could not have come from nothing. A civilization capable of mastering resonant energy, building star-shaped fortresses, and creating global symmetry in architecture could not have appeared within a few centuries, only to vanish again. Something deeper, something more ancient, flows in the veins of Tartaria. And to understand it, we must look beyond continents, beyond maps, beyond the histories we were taught. We must look beneath the sea, where three names still sleep: Atlantis, Mu, and Lemuria. Atlantis. Humanity's first dream. Plato wrote of Atlantis as a noble and mighty empire, possessing technologies thousands of years beyond his time. A prosperous continent in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean where people lived in harmony with energy, light, and sound, until pride led them to destruction. In a single night and day, Atlantis was swallowed by the sea. If we trace ancient maps, we see an invisible line linking Atlantis in the west and Tartaria in the east, a civilization that began in the water and another that ended upon the land. Could Tartaria be the heir of Atlantis, the final empire of that lineage of knowledge? Reaching across the oceans, reborn upon the vast Eurasian plains, continuing the sciences of sacred geometry, resonant energy, and frequency. The star forts of Tartaria may be the remaining imprints of Atlantean technology, where energy was not drawn through wires but through resonance between matter, sound, and the natural magnetic field. Each building, each dome, each archway of the White Cities was like a song written in the golden ratio, as though they did not build in stone, but rather played music with it. Mu and Lemuria. When memory sank beneath the sea. Farther east, between the Indian and Pacific Oceans, legends speak of two other lost continents, Mu and Lemuria, lands said to have vanished beneath the waves tens of thousands of years ago. Ancient Hindu texts, such as the Shatapatha Brahmana and Ramayana, speak of golden cities swallowed by the sea and of teachers who came from the north, from the place where the sky touches the earth. These were the bringers of light, beings who spoke the language of frequency and geometry and who taught humanity to live in harmony with the energy of the cosmos. When Mu and Lemuria disappeared, perhaps a remnant of their people traveled north, across the Siberian lands, and founded the empire of Tartaria upon the Eurasian plateau, a place far from the oceans, where mud and ice could not swallow memory. If Atlantis was the west, the light extinguished in the sea, then Mu and Lemuria were the east, knowledge drowned in silence. And Tartaria, standing between the two, was the final bridge connecting the divided memory of humankind. Ancient science, sound, energy, and sacred geometry. From Atlantis to Tartaria, one belief endured, the belief in the life of energy. They did not see the world through mechanical equations, but through rhythm, through frequency. To them, sound was not just vibration, it was a doorway. When the right frequency was sung, matter resonated and energy awakened. The Tartarian structures, domes, spires, thick stone walls, were resonance chambers designed to capture, amplify, and distribute natural energy. Like the temples of Egypt, Angkor, or Machu Picchu, Tartarian architecture functioned as instruments of communion with the earth. They understood that stone is not dead, metal is not mute, and that each shape, triangle, hexagon, circle, carries its own frequency, its own rhythm. When combined in harmony, they form a sacred language, the language of energy. As Pythagoras once said, geometry is frozen music. And Tartaria may have been the last musician who still remembered how to play that song. The clues that remain, modern archaeologists have found strange traces, straight lines crossing continents, structures aligned with constellations, and stones carved with spirals, the same patterns as acoustic waves. From the Gobi Desert to Siberia, ancient maps depict energy towers and solar circles, whose remnants lie faint beneath the soil today. Tartaria seems to have been more than an empire on land. It was a global energy network, connecting the resonant points that remained from Atlantis and Mu. They did not seek to conquer the Earth. They sought to balance it, and when that network fell, the planet itself lost equilibrium. The seas rose, climates reversed, and humanity forgot how to listen to the heartbeat of the world. Genetic memory, when blood carries the call of the ocean. Perhaps the memory of Tartaria, Atlantis, and Lemuriados not live only in stone, but within human DNA. The dreams of sunken cities, the visions of radiant light, the wordless echoes we feel when standing amid ancient ruins. These may be genetic memories, the soul fragments of civilizations long gone. Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious, the realm where humanity's memories live alongside time itself. Perhaps that is why, when we hear the names Atlantis, Lemuria, or Tartaria, something stirs within us, a strange nostalgia we cannot explain, for it is not personal longing, but the yearning of our species. Tartaria, the final flame of ancient knowledge. If Atlantis was the dawn, then Tartaria was the sunset, the last light of an age when humanity and the cosmos still spoke the same language. A world where energy was not a commodity, but a song, where architecture was not shelter, but resonance, where every stone, every ray of light, every breath was connected to the earth, to the stars, to life itself. When Tartaria vanished, it was not merely the fall of an empire, but the silencing of cosmic memory. An ancient program was shut down so that the world could reboot in a new language, the language of steel, machinery, and noise. Yet deep within consciousness, a faint vibration remains, like the echo of an ocean far away. Tartaria still whispers. And if Tartaria truly was the heir to the legendary continents, then who destroyed them? Were they the very forces written in the Bible's prophecies, Gog and Magog, the destroyers from the north, symbols of chaos and extinction? In the next chapter, we open the gate to Part 10, Gog and Magog, the destroyers of prophecy, to listen to the echo of darkness, where the final light of Tartaria faded away. Part 10, Gog and Magog, the destroyers in prophecy. Before every civilization collapses, there is always a story told about those who came from the north, bearing chaos, fire, and forgetting. From antiquity, in the Bible, the Quran, and many apocalyptic writings, the names Gog and Magog have appeared as symbols of absolute devastation. Those two names, Gog-u-Magog in Hebrew, Yajuj and Majuj in Arabic, are mentioned as destructive forces arriving from the north, who will surge forth in the final age, shattering all order and driving the world back into chaos. But there is a strange detail. When we consult early modern maps from the 16th-18th centuries, the placement of Gog and Magog is neither in Europe nor the Middle East, but in Central Asia, in the very region that contemporary maps labeled Tartaria, when the north becomes history's forbidden zone. For ancient geographers, the north was always a realm of mystery, ranges of eternal ice, rivers that seemed to run against reason, and cities spoken of only in legend. In Western religion and culture, however, the north became entangled with darkness and defiance, just as Lucifer was said to have fallen from heaven to the north. Peoples arriving from that quarter were often cast as incarnations of chaos. So when the maps inscribed Gog and Magog upon the lands of Tartaria, it was more than geography. It was a symbolic sentence, a declaration that that land belongs to the demonic, that those who dwell there stand outside the holy world of humankind. The north was always the direction of shadows, wrote one symbolist, where light bends and memory fails. Might it be that this very labeling transformed Tartaria, a civilization of light, into the embodiment of darkness in the eyes of official history? The deliberate slander of memory. When a civilization is erased from history, its name is seldom the only thing erased. Its memory is smeared. Atlantis was rewritten as a parable of human arrogance. Mu was dismissed as fantasy. And Tartaria, once drawn in detail upon the maps, was abruptly stamped as the land of demons, the birthplace of Gog and Magog. From that point on, everything tied to this region was cloaked in fear and guilt. Tartarian architecture became the fortresses of enemies, symbols of energy were branded sorcery, and the knowledge of resonance, sound, and sacred geometry was exiled from the domain of science, replaced by a cold, linear model, where energy became nothing but fuel, and the soul of matter was erased. To brand Tartaria with Gog and Magog was to legitimize annihilation. Once you persuade humanity that a land is evil, you can destroy it without guilt. From prophecy to politics. In the Bible, Ezekiel 38:39, Gog and Magog are described as vast armies sweeping down from the uttermost north, like a storm covering the face of the land. In the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, 1894-98, they are sealed by the righteous king Dhul-Qarnayn behind a wall of iron until the end of days, when they break it and flood the earth. Curiously, in many early Islamic maps, the Wall of Gog and Magog appears to the north of Persia, near the Altai, precisely where ancient Tartaria lay. If these prophecies were once understood symbolically, in later ages, they were repurposed for political ends. The north, the region of Tartaria, became a pretext for civilizing missions, for conquest justified as liberating the world from demons. Like burning a library and calling it purging wicked knowledge, history once burned an entire civilization in the name of a holy war against darkness. From light into shadow. The irony is bitter. The land, once regarded as a center of the Earth's energy, with star forts, resonant temples, architecture aligned to stars and the sun, was turned into the emblem of Gog and Magog, enemies of the divine. Perhaps Tartaria was not destroyed by war, but by a spiritual campaign, a conversion of symbols, transmuting light into shadow, knowledge into guilt, and causing humankind to turn away from its own origins. Perhaps this is why, when 18th-century Europeans gazed upon Tartarian works, they saw not harmony, but miasma. They heard not the music of resonance, but the call of demons. What had once been the science of energy was imprisoned within churches under another name, magic. Maps, evidence of a distorted memory, ancient atlases, Ortelius, 1570, Homenaires, 1716, depicted Tartaria stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific, annotated Tartaria Magna, Great Tartary. And right beside it, in the northern highlands, two words are etched clearly: Gog and Magog. From this, a chilling hypothesis takes shape. The labeling of Gog and Magog was the first step in erasure. Once official maps portray a civilization as evil, invasions, land seizures, the burning of monuments, all become purification. By the time 18th, 19th century explorers returned to Central Asia, they no longer found Tartaria. Only the lands of Gog and Magog, a desolation left behind. Thus, Tartaria fell into darkness, not the darkness of demons, but the darkness of forgetting. When prophecy becomes a tool to rewrite history, religion, when gripped by power, becomes a weapon to edit memory. Prophecies like those of Gog and Magog, meant to warn of spiritual imbalance, were wielded to define enemies. And so Tartaria, a civilization of sacred geometry and resonant energy, was recast as an empire of devils. In humanity's mind, the idea of harmony was replaced with the fear of chaos. From there, official history begins, a history without a soul, written in the ashes of twisted symbols. Darkness cannot devour all light. Even branded demonic, even burned from the maps, Tartaria has not vanished entirely. In art, in architecture, in the DNA of language, there still echoes the cadence of sacred geometry, the hum of resonance, the trust that the cosmos is a ceaseless symphony. Even the darkest shadow exists only because of light. An anonymous ancient line found in a manuscript from Samarkand. Perhaps Tartaria was exactly that light, a light so radiant that it cast the shadow named Gog and Magog. And when history called them demons, perhaps it only proved that they once shone with a brilliance humanity could not bear. When a civilization is called demonic, it may be because it approached too near the sacred nature of the universe. And when shadow triumphs, what becomes of the souls left from that empire? In the next chapter, Part 11, The Orphan Trains, Reseeding Humanity, we will listen to a chilling tale of hundreds of thousands of children sent across the world as if someone were sowing the seeds of mankind anew. in a world reset after Tartaria. Rang ne, toi jang jam niem vitro chuyen gea dich tuat vietan, troli dich tuat chuyen gip. Voi niem vudich chin sak tung chitiet, gyun uyen uidang, kam suj va kautrus, jong toi chuyen tai bang gion ke truyen kam, toi mien, fu hop voi chuje, history for sleep, bandish, duoi jai gyun guyen tuan bo noi dungos, chi chuyen hoang gonu, sangan yu muat ma, tu nienva kosugoi hinkao. Part 11, The Orphan Trains, Rebuilding Humanity. When a civilization is erased from history, the first thing they take away isn't its books, but the memories of its children. After the shadow of Gog and Magog fell upon ancient maps, after the radiant cities of Tartaria turned to ash, the world entered a strange, haunting silence. No more star forts, no more resonant temples. Only smoke, iron, and the distant cry of locomotives echoing across the dawn of the industrial age. Yet within that sound, the grinding of steel wheels upon the tracks, lay hidden one of the darkest and most mysterious chapters of humankind. The orphan train movement. The trains that carried thousands of children across America from New York to Texas, from Chicago to California. Between 1850 and 1929, it's estimated that more than 250,000 children were loaded onto those trains, torn apart from one another, stripped of names, of memory, of origin. No one knew who their parents were. No records, no roots, only the label. Orphans. But the terrifying question remains, where did they come from? There were no great wars at the time, no plagues, no global famine. And yet hundreds of thousands of children appeared as if gathered from thin air, or from a world that had just been erased. Trains without origins. At first, these trains were hailed as a humanitarian program. The U.S. government and religious charities claimed they were rescuing street children and sending them to new families in the West. But upon closer look, the story begins to fracture. Records show many trains had no passenger manifests, no birth certificates, no family verification. Children were chosen at small railway stations, handed over to farmers, blacksmiths, factory workers, as if they were seeds being planted for a newly engineered society. Where did these children truly come from? Some survivors later recalled fragments of memory. Large white buildings, round pillars, domes, and echoing sounds like music inside stone. Those descriptions eerily matched Tartarian architecture. Could these have been the last descendants of Tartaria, children gathered from reset cities, placed on trains and scattered across the world? Their ethnic memory erased, so they would never know where they came from. The Odd Fellows, the keepers in the shadows. A strange coincidence emerges. At the very same time, a secretive fraternity rose to prominence. The Odd Fellows, an order claiming humanitarian ideals, known for running orphanages and caring for the abandoned. Their emblem, 3 linked rings: faith, hope, charity. Yet behind that motto, something unsettling hides. Odd Fellows temples across America shared nearly identical architecture, domes, arches, and round columns, once again Tartarian style. Inside, many contained resonance chambers, perfectly designed domed halls with impeccable acoustics, decorated with symbols of triangles, circles, and eyes. The sacred language of Tartarian geometry. Perhaps they weren't merely caretakers. Perhaps they were guardians. Maybe they were entrusted with a far deeper task: to reseed humanity, to plant these children like seeds of a new beginning, while the memory of Tartaria was buried deep in the collective unconscious. When humanity was rewritten by its children, a civilization truly dies only when its memory ceases to be told. If the adults of Tartaria perished in the cataclysm, then the children were the last living vessels of memory. But if those children were raised in the new society, taught that history began with the Industrial Revolution, that energy came only from steam and coal, that ancient domes and spires were European styles, not remnants of Tartaria. Then the collective memory was rewritten completely. A new world was formed, and humanity was reset, without ever realizing it. No bloodshed, no violence, only children, blank pages, rewritten with the story of the victors. Voices of the nameless old recordings still preserve the trembling voices of those who once rode the orphan trains. In their old age, their memories faded, but the haunting lingered. I remember tall white buildings, gleaming like marble, and a sound, like music, echoing in my head. We didn't know why we were there, only that. We were told to forget. The phrase, "told to forget," repeats again and again, a wound deeper than the loss of parents, as if they had been the last witnesses of a forbidden age. The reseeding of memory. If the Tartaria hypothesis is true, then the orphan trains were more than a social movement. They were a ritual of recreation. Not genocide, but genetic reset. Not erasing memory with blood, but with nurture. By scattering these children across the nation, they created a generation without lineage, without memory, without cultural root, bound only to the new reality they were taught to believe was natural. A new world need not be built from matter, only from the rewritten memory of mankind. Strange bricks in the foundations of the modern world. Look at the 20th century, the sudden surge of technology and industry. The world rebuilt itself upon people of unknown ancestry. The children of the orphan trains grew into workers, inventors, soldiers, politicians, carrying within them an invisible emptiness, a white gap in memory. Perfect citizens for the new era, obedient, efficient, unquestioning. If Tartaria once lived in resonance, the new world lives in fragmentation. Where once humanity listened to the breath of the earth, now it hears only the hum of machines. Perhaps those trains marked the thin line between two realities, one erased and one newly programmed. The children of Tartaria. Who are we? If the hypothesis holds true, then perhaps we are their descendants, carrying in our blood the lost memory of Tartaria, though we no longer recognize it. Maybe that's why, sometimes when we stand before an ancient building, when echoes hum beneath a dome, we feel an inexplicable longing, a nostalgia for something vast and ancient, still resonating within us. If those children were the seeds of a new humanity, then in their blood, and in ours, may still lie traces of the giants, of the old gods who once built Tartaria. In Part 12, the giant bloodline. Within human DNA, we will journey into the realm of genetics, where the double helix may conceal forbidden memories of evolution. The hidden proof that Tartaria never truly vanished. Role: I am your Vietnamese English translation expert, translation assistant, dedicated to delivering a faithful line-by-line translation that preserves every detail, nuance, and structure, while rendering the prose motivational, evocative, and soothing. Perfect for the History for Sleep theme. Part 12. The giant bloodline in human DNA. History can be burned, maps can be redrawn, but blood does not know how to lie. As the orphan trains roll on through time, they leave behind a quiet question. Could those very children be the seeds of a new humanity, carrying within them the genetic memory of Tartaria, but embedded with forgetting? If we cannot find Tartaria on maps, if we cannot hear their voices in the chronicles, then perhaps we must look for them in the deepest place of all, within the human body itself. For sometimes DNA is the oldest surviving epic. Ancient codes in the human bloodstream. Modern geneticists have proven that a portion of the modern human genome, Homo sapiens, is not entirely pure. Roughly 1 to 4% of our DNA is inherited from Neanderthals, and an additional 6% derives from Denisovans, an ancient human lineage that lived in the Altai Mountains of Central Asia. This means within us remain traces of peoples, more robust, more powerful, and perhaps more knowing than we imagined. And the places they once lived align uncannily with the lands of ancient Tartaria. Might that region, between Siberia, Kazakhstan, and Mongolia, have been the cradle of lineages born of ancient and modern humans. Might the Tartarians be no myth at all, but the direct descendants of Neanderthals and Denisovans, beings who stepped out of humanity's dawn with towering stature and a wisdom beyond time? Giants, parallel lineages. When archaeology first unearthed Neanderthal bones, the scientific world declared them short, crude, and underdeveloped. But recent studies suggest the opposite. They had larger cranial capacity than modern humans, more robust skeletal architecture, and extraordinary adaptation to harsh environments. And the Denisovans, though known only from a few small bones, their genetic signatures spread across Asia and Oceania, evidence of a dominant lineage, traveling, interbreeding, and leaving a deep genetic inheritance. The Tartaria hypothesis proposes these peoples, or their descendants, developed a resonant civilization where energy, sound, and matter were understood as movements in one cosmic symphony. Perhaps they were the very giants of legend, the Nephilim of the Bible, the Titans of Greek myth, the Bogotyrs of old Russian epics. And when that civilization fell, their blood did not vanish. It flowed into us. Genetic memory. When DNA remembers, Carl Jung once said, "What we call myth is the collective dream of humanity." Perhaps DNA dreams as well. Scientists today speak of epigenetic memory, the inheritance of certain experiences, traumas, or knowledge, not through stories but through gene expression. If memory can record fear, why not ancient wisdom? Might our DNA still echo with the knowledge of those who spoke in frequency, built with sound, and connected to the earth through geometric resonance? If so, whenever a piece of music makes our hearts tremble, whenever we stand before an old building and feel the uncanny, it may not be mere emotion, but the awakening of Tartarian genetic memory. Mixed bloodlines, souls that still remember. Modern science calls the mixing of ancient lineages a biological accident, but in the Tartarian hypothesis, it was intentional. The ancient giants may have created modern humans as part of an evolutionary design, infusing us with sensitivity to natural energy, then gradually receding, so the new generation could learn the ways of matter. But when the age of machines rose, those genes fell asleep. The musical notes written into DNA, once singing in resonance, fell silent beneath engines and current. Yet sometimes, in the stillness of night, we feel a strange calling, a current coursing along the spine, a sensation like homesickness, with no home to point to. Perhaps that is Tartarian blood stirring awake, the quiet reemergence of inherited legacy. In recent decades, genetics has uncovered oddities. Some people carry gene variants for heightened cognition, perfect pitch, intuition, and empathy. Certain studies even suggest DNA can emit electromagnetic waves and respond to sonic frequencies. This eerily aligns with the old Tartarian belief that humans are living instruments and each person is a small resonance within the orchestra of the cosmos. Might the Tartarian legacy, after millennia of forgetting, now be reactivating within human DNA? Not through language, temples, or doctrine, but through the biological frequency of memory. We are them, and they never disappeared. If our blood carries traces of giants, then Tartaria never truly died. It merely changed form, hiding in genomes, heartbeats, and breath. Each time a child is born, history is written anew, not in letters, but in the vibration of life. Perhaps we, the people of the 21st century, carry that ancient memory without knowing it. And when we dream of white cities, when domes, light, and echoing harmonies feel like home, it is not fantasy. It is DNA retelling the story of Tartaria. Blood is the final language of memory. The body remembers what the mind forgets. We can lose language, monuments, chronicles, but we cannot lose biological memory. If Tartaria once stood at the summit of sound and energy, then perhaps every cell of our bodies is a residue of that technology. We do not need machines to connect with the universe. We are the instruments of resonance, the living memory of an erased civilization. And once humanity remembers, Tartaria will rise again, not on maps, but in human consciousness itself. If the song of Tartaria still flows in our blood, what erased them from the face of the earth? Who severed the bridge between memory and reality? In Part 13, A Skeptical Lens and the Conclusion, we step out of the mist of myth into the light of reason, to ask, are these things true, or the collective dream of a humanity longing to remember itself? Part 13, A Skeptical Lens and the Conclusion. When truth fades into light, not every mystery needs to be solved. Some are meant to be listened to, like the echo of time. We have traveled through veiled memories, white cities, buried, nameless children, blood that carries ancient remembrance, and a civilization seemingly wiped from every page. Tartaria, a name now whispered like wind, still divides the world between belief and doubt. Researchers, admirers of old maps, dreamers hunting the footprints of giants, all wish to believe Tartaria once existed, that the world was reset, that human history is not as simple as we were taught. And yet, before the wall of modern science and official history, such hypotheses are brushed away, like dust from an archaeologist's desk. When reason speaks, historians argue that Tartaria was not a hidden empire, but a vague geographic term, used to denote the vast unknown of Central Asia and Siberia, a label born of Western ignorance. They say those 16th, 18th century maps are not evidence of a nation, but of limited European knowledge of Asia. As for Tartarian architecture, domes, columns, resplendent halls, they call it neoclassicism, an Enlightenment style spread across continents. Buildings half buried below the present street, urban layers, they say, roads raised over centuries. A tidy explanation? Reasonable and empty. Yet the questions remain. If all is so simple, why do so many maps from diverse sources place Tartaria in the same location and scale? If it's mere mistranslation, why do Tartarian architectural signatures appear in Europe, America, India, Japan, with the same symmetric energy layouts as if built in one sacred language? And if history is continuous, why did so many ancient civilizations, Sumer, Maya, Indus, Egypt, vanish in rhythm, only for humanity to begin again, as if programmed? There are no answers, only the silence of stones, and the feeling we have lost something vast. Skepticism, not denial, but invitation. Science can reject hypotheses, but it cannot extinguish the urgings of spirit and intuition. Whether Tartaria existed or not, it has become a symbol of longing for lost harmony, for a time when humans breathed with the earth, before separation from nature, before machines replaced the heartbeat of the world. Perhaps Tartaria was never a place, but a state of consciousness, a level of awareness humanity once touched, then forgot, in the intoxication of power and technology. Tartaria as an inner mirror, Carl Jung wrote, "Whatever is not made conscious will be expressed as fate." Perhaps Tartaria is our collective unconscious, a memory we repressed, of an age of resonance where mind and soul were one. Because we forgot, the world repeats its tragedy, war, division, chaos, as a reminder of what lies buried. If Tartaria truly existed, perhaps they knew that energy, sound, and love are forms of the same frequency. And when we turned from that truth, we entered an era of noise, loud without and empty within. Truth or myth? Which matters more? Perhaps Tartaria was not a physical empire but a collective memory, a symbol of what humanity has lost, its connection to the earth, to sound, to the soul itself. Perhaps the mud flood was not a physical event, but a metaphor for the deluge of forgetting that swept away sacred knowledge. And the orphans are simply us, humans severed from origin, wandering the modern world, seeking our mother, the civilization we lost. Perhaps Tartaria was never meant to be found in the earth, but rediscovered within the soul. An invitation from the silence. On certain nights when the world is asleep, the wind passes through ancient cities, and you may hear something very faint. Not a human voice, but the echo of memory. It might float from old domes, from bricks in fallen walls, from your own heartbeat, where Tartaria still hums, like a song humanity once knew by heart. Maybe Tartaria does not live on the ground, but in the vibration of every soul, in the longing to return to what is sacred. And that is why this story endures, because it speaks not only of the past, but of us. Now, those still searching for the part of ourselves that was erased. Perhaps Tartaria was never a literal empire, but the collective memory of what humankind has lost. Listen, in the wind, in stone, in the old buildings. For perhaps Tartaria is still whispering there. The voice descends, like the final breath of an old tale. And in that hush, the listener no longer asks, "Was Tartaria real?" but begins to hear the inward summons. The voice of memory, the voice of the soul, the voice of a civilization still alive in every cell. As the story closes, we realize, perhaps the greatest mystery is not Tartaria, but the human mind itself, for in seeking a forgotten civilization, we stumble upon the deepest part of who we are. Now close your eyes and let Tartaria's echo carry you into sleep, where ancient empires still breathe to the rhythm of the cosmos.